Hello, I'm Trisha Keene. Almost anywhere you look, you can see it. Las Vegas is a boomtown. We have grown from a desert watering hole to a top international destination. When does the excitement and the profits from expansion become too much for our area to handle? This touches almost everyone in some way. So 13 Action News presents a special report we're calling Meadows to Metropolis. One of the biggest challenges we face is our water supply. Nothing is more critical. When the clock strikes 2022, the federal water shortage declaration will cut our supply by 7 billion gallons. And 13 Chief Investigator Darcy Spears examines how we got here.
This area, the Springs Preserve, is considered by many to be the birthplace of Las Vegas. Early settlers discovered springs here in the middle of the desert, providing the most basic element, water coming from runoff from the Spring Mountains and Mount Charleston. But as we would soon realize, the water from the springs and the meadow that was Las Vegas would soon not be enough to sustain a bustling metropolis.
At one time, this was Big Spring. This is what was the origin of Las Vegas, if you will.
John Hyatt sits on a citizens advisory board for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. For nearly 3 decades, he's worked to protect open spaces in southern Nevada.
Some 4,000 gallons a minute of water flowed out of this spring downhill, down past what is now downtown Las Vegas, just out to the north of it.
And by virtue of this, it enabled Las Vegas to be.
Absolutely. Without this source of water, Las Vegas would not exist.
The roof structure behind us is a spring house built to keep the water clean. It was one of several springs to be tapped at a time when our vital resource was plentiful.
Water would actually spurt up out of the ground, sometimes as much as 20 feet high.
But that would not last.
And as the population grew and grew and grew, we used more and more water. So by the 1920s, we no longer had water spurting out of the ground here. We had to start pumping, and that just continued.
So much pumping, the water table dropped, the impact seen on this well from the 1940s.
Basically, this was ground level at the time that this footing was poured around the casing. And you can see that now that's about 5 feet off the ground. So the ground essentially has shrunk away from the casing here due to ground subsidence caused by water withdrawal.
The valley discovered and tapped into another source of water hundreds of miles away, the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. The 1922 Colorado River Compact divvied up water between Nevada and 6 other states: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. Based on an estimated 17.5 million acre feet, that's 5.7 trillion gallons of water every year. Mexico would eventually get a cut too.
For untold centuries, the turbid waters of the Colorado River battered their way through the forbidding canyons of its 1,700-mile course, traversing the arid Southwest.
In May 1932, an engineering marvel. Construction of the Hoover Dam created Lake Mead, the reservoir holding Nevada's yearly share, 300,000 acre-feet or 97 billion gallons. But by the 1950s, when our population was still less than 100,000, there were already concerns about that 17.5 million acre allotment.
So that number, 17.5 million, really came about from data collected over a relatively short period of time, a decade. And looking in retrospect, that was a very high flow period of time.
John Ensminger is general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, the cooperative responsible for managing our valley's water. The buzzword in water right now seems to be uncertainty.
Well, I think when people talk about uncertainty, the main thing they're looking at is the recent hydrology on the Colorado River.
Recent hydrology that doesn't match up well with water allocations from nearly 100 years ago.
Well, I would say prudent water managers in the 21st century are not going to rely upon the amount of water the river gave us in the 20th century. We know we're going to have less water moving forward than what was divvied up in 1922.
A lot less water and many more people.
The average flow of the river in the last 20 years is 12.3 million acre feet, and the climate scientists are telling us we need to prepare for a future with even less than 12.3.
Ensminger says conservation efforts, like changing how we landscape, addresses a basic problem of demand.
So far, in the last 20 years, Las Vegas has been the most successful urban water conservation metropolitan area, I would say, in the world. We've added over 800,000 new residents to this valley since 2002 and actually reduced our water usage by 23%.
Resulting in Nevada using less than our allotted 300,000 acre feet from Lake Mead. We'll have to keep doing that.
The shortage declaration takes that legal allocation down to 279,000 acre feet, but last year we used about 255,000 acre feet. So we actually had extra water, and what the shortage declaration means for Southern Nevada is we have less extra water, not that we have to actually use less water than we used last year.
But future population predictions from UNLV show Clark County will grow by 40 to 50,000 people every year for the foreseeable future.
The best way to make sure you have enough water is to make sure you have control over how much water you're using.
You can feel the growth of Las Vegas all around us. It's in the air we breathe. Now to a team report from our morning and evening meteorologists looking at efforts to improve air quality.
Groundwater here at what is now Springs Preserve drew humans to the Las Vegas Valley an estimated 15,000 years ago. Whether it was those indigenous people, Mormon settlers in the 1800s, the railroad boom of the early 1900s, or the 2+ million people who call the valley home today, we've always thrived in spite of our harsh climates.
But how do we make sure that our natural resources can keep up with our explosive growth? Experts say the key is sustainable development, smart waste management, water conservation, and developing clean, reliable energy sources. More drivers are already switching from gas to electric vehicles, but making sure that our air quality remains livable is a primary focus of the Department of Environment and Sustainability of Clark County.
Transportation continues to be the #1 source of air pollution in Nevada.
Although factors like geography, topography, and climate are stacked against us, and wildfire smoke often drifts in from other states, the data shows mitigation efforts are working. Ozone has decreased 14% since 2007, even though our population increased by 1 million people.
Interestingly enough, with population growth, we are seeing that the modeling is showing that the pollutants will decrease.
And is that due to the efforts we've made for more reliable, clean energy sources?
I think is going to be that plus moving to more electric vehicles.
Buying an electric vehicle isn't realistic for many of us, but keeping on top of emissions tests, filling the gas tank before sunrise or after sunset, or even just mapping out an efficient route for errands to cut down on miles can really make a difference. Cynthia Moore works with the group Mom's Clean Air Force, and she has an important reason to care about our air quality.
Yes, actually my son is the reason why I became so aware of air quality, because when he was born, we used to live close to Lone Mountain. And when he turned about a year old, we moved over to the east side, and that's when I started noticing that he was having allergic reactions, and when it's really windy like this, a lot of times he starts having breathing problems.
Cynthia uses multiple air purifiers in her home, limits Liam's time outside when the air quality is poor, and works with Mom's Clean Air Force to advocate for clean air on several government levels. Doctors like pulmonologist Lloyd Del Mundo at Valley Hospital Medical Center have seen an increase in patients, both young and old, with breathing issues as our city has grown.
So the problem is the smog. It causes inflammation into your lungs. It kind of infects the lining of the lung and the airway, which in turn causes you to get infections much easier, causes you to cough more, and basically just reduces the quality of your lung function in general.
And as our population continues to grow, our efforts to keep air quality healthy in the future will also have to increase.
We're always looking for new efforts and initiatives to implement for cleaner air. We continue to install new monitoring stations in different parts of the valley so we can see what's happening where the population is now growing. And we're also looking at implementing some other incentivized programs with our permitted business community to help lower the pollutants in the air. So We all breathe the same air, so we have to continue improving.
You know, Danny, probably the most important thing we can do is decrease our daily carbon footprint and just to increase our awareness of how many resources we're using in our everyday lives.
Right. The dried up water source here at Springs Preserve is proof that just because something's here today doesn't promise it's around for tomorrow. And whether it's the water that we need to survive here in the desert or just the clean air that we breathe, protecting our natural resources is key to making sure that Las Vegas is a safe and healthy home for generations to come.
As more people call the Las Vegas Valley home, where will they live, work, and play? Well, I asked community leaders, will Las Vegas grow outward or upward? What started as a watering hole in the middle of the Mojave Desert has become one of the fastest growing communities in the United States. People living here say it's easy to understand why.
We have good people, good weather, and exceptional opportunities, unlike anywhere else in the world.
I mean, how can I not sell this great community? It is simply electrifying.
And it's that electricity that is projected to boost the population past 3 million by 2035, according to the UNLV Center for Business and Economic Research Projects. But as the community welcomes more people, we face some big questions. Where do we put them? And how do we grow? Do we spread out or do we build up?
Why not both? I think let's look at opportunities to increase density in certain areas where that's appropriate. But I think there's also no doubt you can see the way the community is growing, and that is out. We happen to have land on the outskirts.
Clark County Commissioner Michael Naff says the Las Vegas Valley faces some challenges in spreading out because it's surrounded by mountains and federally owned land. There are only so many places to go.
There's still available land in the Southwest, and we're certainly seeing a lot of that growth.
Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones says the Southwest is booming, but it's about to run out of space within the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that we need to grow up, and that means that places like downtown and Spring Mountain and other places.
Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman says downtown is already seeing success as an area that is building up.
It's become an exciting place, and not only exciting for the small businesses, but for the investors and these high rises that are going up and low and mid rise that are mixed use.
She also sees opportunity to expand the city northwest thanks to a deal with the Paiute tribe.
We can do an industrial park, but also a pretty large development of about 740 acres.
But that's not the only area in the valley expected to see a boom over the next decade. North Las Vegas is set to add more than 100,000 residents by 2030.
We will be the fastest growing city in Nevada.
North Las Vegas Mayor John Lee says the city's space is attracting manufacturing businesses, which means jobs and people coming to fill those jobs looking for a place to live. He says North Las Vegas is ready.
We have enough land in North Las Vegas for many, many years for homes.
But Mayor Lee says in the next 20 years, even North Las Vegas may run out of space. So it begs the question, as the valley fills up, where do we go next? Go south, says one commissioner.
I see no doubt the supplemental airport is a huge opportunity.
Clark County Commissioner Michael Naff says a proposed airport in Jean could spur growth south of the valley, close to the California border. But to our west, Nye County officials say they think one day more people will be traveling over the hump to Pahrump.
I definitely think it's, on point to be a bedroom community to Las Vegas.
Brett Wagner is a planning director for Nye County. He says the space, affordability, and a reasonable commute are already attracting new residents to the area, and developers are taking notice. The explosive growth of Las Vegas is easy to spot when it comes to housing. I speak with local experts who say whether you're looking to buy or rent, some people just won't be able to afford Las Vegas as we continue to grow.
I'm looking for my forever dream home.
Bill Dennis just moved here from New York, and he's happy with what he's seeing.
It seems like there's plenty out there, but it's just finding the right one.
Bill knows prices are high, but feels the Las Vegas market is fair. He says he's getting a lot more house here than he would back home.
For the same homes that I'm looking at here, I'd probably be paying a few $100,000 more back on the East Coast.
Everywhere in the country, this is what's happening. Prices are going up.
Aldo Martinez is president of the Las Vegas Realtors Association and says don't let sticker shock prevent you from buying a home.
We live on an economy of what we can finance. It's the reality of what it is. You're not paying cash. Most people are financing it.
You may think you can't afford a $400,000 house, but interest rates are low, real low.
With a mortgage offering a 3% interest rate, that $400,000 house will now cost you about $1,600 a month.
Martinez says rates won't be this low forever.
So buy now while the rates are lower, and 42% of your payment is going to principal reductions.
But picky buyers will need to be patient. Home construction is down, and there's fewer choices than we've seen in the past. But Martinez says that might be a good thing.
When we were building 38,000 homes during the height of the market, and people were owning 4 homes or more and couldn't even afford the one that they lived in.
Just a couple years later, the U.S. housing bubble would burst, devastating the economy. But this year, we've seen just more than 10,000 new homes in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, fewer options mean some median income Las Vegans won't be able to afford a home of their own.
Yeah, less people are going to qualify. It's going to be a lot tougher.
The high home prices also translate to high rental prices.
Almost all the tenants have seen an increase in rising rent.
Rick Raines is owner of the Atlas Group, a property management firm with about 600 Valley properties. Despite the inflation, Raines says many tenants are staying put.
They first get that initial shock, but when they go out and they try to find similar properties, they're even more.
If a tenant feels their rate hike is just too much, Raines says there's typically a line of renters looking to scoop up their property.
There's somebody else ready to take it because they're moving out of some place that got bumped in even higher.
The average Las Vegas rental will cost you about $1.50 a square foot. Prices are certainly better in some states, but worse in others.
When you're at a small apartment in California, you're looking at about $3.65 a square foot. So if you go to Georgia, it's about 90 cents a square foot.
One thing that's a little different in 2021 is the uptick of retirees moving here to rent after selling a home in another state.
What they typically do is put a whole year's worth of rent down, and they basically check out our valley.
There are also renters still willing to pay top dollar for prime real estate.
We just got done renting a couple of houses for $8,000-9,000 a month out at Lake Las Vegas.
But Raines admits it's a tough market for renters.
It's a job to find a place that you can afford and be one of the first to get an application in, especially at the lower pricing.
That means some renters will be pushed out of the market. But Raines says certain demographics will always be here to rent. Those temporarily stationed at Nellis, corporate types here for a limited time, college students and young adults.
There's the demand in the rentals, and that's why the rental prices continue to rise, is because housing prices have basically put a lot of people in a position of only being able to rent.
As for Bill, he's one of those fortunate enough to buy, and he's looking to find something quick before interest rates rise.
By the turn of the new year calendar, it could be up at 4% or more.
For decades, the hospitality, gaming, and tourism industry has been and will likely continue to be the Valley's largest industry. But as we've seen, that leaves us especially vulnerable to massive disruptive events like the Great Recession, 1 October, and most recently, the pandemic. 13 Action News anchor Todd Quinones examines the challenges and successes of diversifying our economy.
As many as 60,000 bottles can be processed every day here at Lucky Jack Cold Brew Coffee. The Nevada-built company at Lake Mead and Nellis ships out coffee across the country, but there's a challenge. They need to hire all kinds of engineers to maintain all of this equipment.
So you need good, smart people here with a lot of knowledge. And if you go to an industrial town, they're plentiful. In an entertainment, gaming, hospitality town, there's a shortage of them.
So what do you do in that case?
Well, we have outsourced some things from all over the country.
This is just one example of the hurdles that come with diversifying Nevada's economic base.
The problem is that, you just don't become an engineer. You got to be trained, and that's a higher education degree. And, we're expanding the engineering schools. But it takes a while once that pipeline starts and you get people in it to get them back out of there.
During an extended interview with 13 Action News, Governor Steve Sisolak didn't shy away from the challenges for Southern Nevada to diversify our economy. Achieving that largely depends on getting other industries to relocate here.
What do these companies tell you why they're not coming to Nevada?
One of the big reasons is workforce and education. We don't have the workforce to meet a lot of their needs. And there's still some concern even about our K-12 system, that we're just not ranked high enough, and they want a good place for their employees and their executives to be able to send their kids to school.
Any CEO looking to relocate also has to consider the cost of housing for their employees.
Are you troubled at all about the cost of housing? The big sell for Southern Nevada for a long time is, hey, you can come here and it's cheap to live. That's not necessarily the case anymore.
It's not at all the case anymore. You're absolutely right, and I am troubled. I'm troubled by that. You are pricing an entire generation out of the homeownership market.
The challenges are great, but the need to overcome those challenges may be even greater. Take a look here at this chart provided by local area unemployment statistics on Dieter's website. The blue line is Nevada's unemployment rate at the height of the pandemic. It soared to nearly 30%, the highest in the country. The national average, in orange, was half that. This is the very definition of a boom or bust economy that is tied to tourism and gaming.
We need to have businesses that will be able to keep this economy running, keeping people employed.
Sisolak points to tax breaks or abatements as being one carrot that has lured some businesses here, along with thousands of jobs.
We've got several autonomous vehicles. Murrow, the one that you see sometimes with pizza ads on TV, this vehicle and no driver delivers pizza out there. We've got a big facility at the Speedway and they're manufacturing.
Solar energy also carries some promise of becoming something Southern Nevada could export.
I was briefed on a situation at UNLV where they now have the technology that they developed that from going from point A to point B, there's a power loss, there's an energy loss, but they've come up with a way to transmit it that there is no energy loss, which is really revolutionary scientific developments, which is going to help us there.
Also promising, our marijuana industry had more than $1 billion in taxable sales in the last year. And there's also a big push by the different chambers of commerce and the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, or LVGEA, to lure businesses here.
What did you guys figure out?
So, Kevin, we really appreciate your offer.
That includes Cubicall. The California startup seen on ABC's Shark Tank makes portable enclosed cubicles for businesses that offer privacy in open concept offices. The brothers who own it were looking to move. Nevada, Florida, and Texas were all on the list of possibilities. Then the LVGEA stepped in.
We didn't even make the decision yet to move here, and they brought us to lunch to go meet the mayor of North Las Vegas.
In the end, Sisolak says it won't likely be one major industry that will help stabilize the economic base of the valley, but really rather a collection of small to mid-sized companies that see promise in our metropolis.
With more families moving here, it means their children will need to go to school. 13 Action News reporter Jeremy Chen shows you the big discussion over breaking up the Clark County School District and what the district is doing to physically expand.
The exponential growth of the Las Vegas Valley has no doubt been felt through public education. The Clark County School District growing into the 5th largest in the nation, serving about 310,000 students. There have been past criticisms of the district becoming too big and unwieldy to serve all its students, bringing up calls to break it up.
You'd have these smaller districts that could be more focused on the actual needs of the student populations that they're being served.
Kenneth Retzel, the Director of Education Policy at the Gwynn Center, says the idea behind smaller districts means a more focused approach to funding, like between urban and rural schools.
More so than at CCSD, where there's a myriad of issues, and then that they're trying to deal with all of them.
Retzel says a CCSD breakup, though, would bring significant logistical challenges.
Instead of having one superintendent, you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, however many districts you decide to have, which I guess that's the first question is how many districts do you have?
Rebecca Garcia with the Nevada PTA says breaking up the district could cost more money all around.
Instead of having one HR
department, one legal department, you're duplicating all of those different functions and activities.
Garcia also says equity issues are a concern with population growth across the valley not evenly distributed.
Would that make districts of haves and have-nots that would just further exacerbate the inequities that we already see?
Despite more people moving to the valley, CCSD enrollment has actually declined from a recent peak of about 321,000 in 2017-2018 to about 310,000 for the 21-22 school year. The pandemic only served as one of a few reasons for the decline.
Some parents are either choosing private schools or charter schools in the area, so you're going to see that.
CCSD officials are confident enrollment will eventually bounce back.
I do believe that we'll have a rebound in CCSD students. Obviously, that's going to happen through offering a variety of learning experiences.
To better offer those experiences, the district is working on its capital improvement plan, focusing on replacing and repairing older campuses.
We have a lot of very old schools in the valley that have been neglected, and we're going to have a big push to get those schools up to current standard through a replacement program.
This includes construction at Las Vegas Academy of the Arts. CCSD Facilities Chief Jeff Wagner says better school buildings allows students to be in a 21st century learning environment.
The pandemic has brought into a lot of people's attention things such as indoor air quality, outside air, security issues, things of that nature.
The district is also looking at tackling overcrowding and potential growth. Nevada ranked as having the biggest class sizes in the nation back in 2018. CCSD's plans include building 5 new high schools and 10 new elementary schools in the next 14 years.
A full-blown staffing crisis at local hospitals. It's another challenge created by our growing pains right here in the valley. Reporter Kelsey McFarland shows what's being done to lure more doctors right here to Las Vegas.
There's a lot of professions that are necessary to keep our healthcare system running. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, medical assistants, the list goes on. For the purposes of this story, we're focusing on physicians and the lack thereof in Southern Nevada. Something acknowledged by Dr. Mark J. Kahn, Dean of the new Kirk Kerkorian UNLV School of Medicine.
Unfortunately, with the growth in population, we have not had a growth in the number of healthcare providers.
According to a 2019 report by the Association of American Medical Colleges, Nevada has 213 doctors per 100,000 residents, ranking our state 46, one of the worst in the country. But how many doctors do we need per 100,000 residents? That depends on who you talk to. But if we wanted to be in the top tier in the country, that number would need to double.
The only specialty that approaches national norms in Southern Nevada is plastic surgery. So everything else is actually deficient.
I talked to Mason Van Howling, Chief Executive Officer here at University Medical Center, home to the first and only Level 1 trauma center in Southern Nevada. He says the need for doctors is made worse by pandemic burnout, so they're working hard to keep morale up and retain the talent that's already here.
It's a challenge every day to be able to staff and take care of the patients that we do here at UMC, but all hospitals, not only within the state, but nationwide. So we're competing with a very tight labor pool.
UMC takes in many residents and fellows from local universities, but at the pace our population is growing, it's not enough. So the hospital recruits nationally as well.
And we've got great partnerships with all the academic institutions, and they're working very hard, but the demand that we're seeing in hospitals in particular is outpacing the growth of the education of the students.
The UNLV Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine is the newest hope in bringing the next generation of doctors to Southern Nevada. The new campus should be ready for students by the summer of 2022.
So our mission at the School of Medicine is to care for our community. And part of that is producing the doctors for the future. We absolutely look for doctors who have a connection to Las Vegas and look for medical students who want to stay in Las Vegas.
36% of the first graduating class stayed in Nevada. Dr. Kahn says they need to make that number much higher in the future. He plans to do so by expanding residency options and working towards having scholarship aids, meaning students can work to pay off tuition debt if they stay in Southern Nevada.
because after all, we're here to improve healthcare, but we're also here to diversify our economy